Crimson twilight spilled across the desert plain, staining the sands with the color of a fresh wound. Mary Quinn could hear heavy breathing behind her. Hers, or his, or perhaps the desert's own ragged exhalation. She knew in that moment that come sunrise, only one of them might walk away with a heartbeat still pounding in their chest. The wind carried the scent of creosote and tumbleweeds across miles of cracked earth. Wyoming Territory's high desert was as beautiful as it was punishing. Pale blue sky stretched endlessly, without mercy, offering no cloud to break the sun's fierce glare. And yet, here on this broken land where the wind whistled a lonely tune, people came in search of new beginnings, or sometimes running from old disasters. Mary Quinn was among these hopeful wanderers. She stepped off the battered stagecoach in a settlement so new it had no official name, just a small cluster of ramshackle buildings hugging the dusty ground. She clutched a carpetbag full of her meager possessions. 19 years old, with sorrow smudged into the corners of her wide green eyes, Mary came to Wyoming in search of work, of a future that might let her leave her past behind. She wore a plain calico dress and a tattered shawl. A letter from a distant aunt had promised employment at a small ranch in the desert, a place called Painted Vistas, run by a woman who'd once known Mary's mother. Painted Vistas was rumored to be a sanctuary, though difficult to reach, especially now with the roads half buried in drifting sand. But Mary had nowhere else to go. Her goal, her fervent hope, was to find a small measure of independence, a life she could claim as her own. Even now, she heard her father's dismissive growl at the back of her mind, saw his whiskey-glazed sneer. The day she stole away, she vowed never to return to that cramped cabin in Missouri, never to hear him rail against her for thinking too highly of herself. Here in this raw territory, she wanted to prove her worth. But courage was born from fear, and Mary's greatest fear was a quiet dread of failing again, failing to stand on her own 2 feet. She had once before tried to escape her father's violent shadow, only to be dragged back by threats and false promises. This time, she had nowhere else to run if she failed. The desert's emptiness would swallow her whole. She was not the only traveler stepping onto that dusty main street. By her side was White Conroy, a man perhaps twice Mary's age, with a face as rough as the wooden beams of the saloon behind him. His hat was tilted just so, battered from years on the trail, shading his steel gray eyes. A gambler and sometimes gunslinger, Wyatt had drifted across the frontier with no permanent home. His wiry build and silver-streaked hair told a story of near misses and tragedies. He claimed to have come west because there's a fortune in every horizon, if you've got the guts to grab it. Wyatt's goal was to strike it rich, by any means that didn't devour his conscience completely. An old friend had told him of silver out in the Painted Vistas region, untapped veins that a wise man could mine before the boom towns erupted. He was tired of nights spent shuffling cards under lamp light and running from saloon debts. His fear was obscurity, an unmarked grave by the roadside, forgotten by all. He longed for one honest chance to stake a claim and stand for something. Yet Wyatt carried emotional weight beyond mere restlessness. He had lost a wife in a stagecoach robbery years ago. That memory haunted him, each new place a chance to outrun the ghosts of his past. Thus, with different hopes burning in their hearts, Mary Quinn and Wyatt Conroy both found themselves on the edge of civilization, spitting dust from their throats and staring out into the wilderness. When they learned they shared a common destination, that Painted Vistas lay to the north, beyond an unforgiving stretch of land best crossed together, they struck up an uneasy alliance. Mary needed protection, someone who knew how to handle a 6-shooter if trouble came. Wyatt needed direction to the ranch, having only partial instructions from a questionable tip. Mary didn't fully trust him. She saw a flicker in his eyes that suggested he had bent more rules, and perhaps broken them, than an honest man should. But necessity was a stern teacher, and Painted Vistas was still a 3-day journey away, through hostile territory where bullets were cheaper than food. Neither had the means or time to hire additional help. As the sun dipped and the local saloon's lamps began to glow, Mary and Wyatt found themselves seated at a rickety table, sipping watery coffee and mapping their route. Flickering lantern light cast trembling shadows on their faces, revealing their thoughts: Mary's quiet desperation, Wyatt's simmering regret. Outside, the wind hissed across the desert's teeth. There, in that frontier twilight, a fragile alliance was born. Soft darkness blanketed the settlement's makeshift main street. The moon hovered behind thin clouds, painting the desert in silver. Mary watched from a second-floor window in the lodging house. She hadn't been able to sleep, nerves danced inside her belly. Tomorrow, she and Wyatt would set out at dawn. She remembered each time she'd tried to strike out on her own, how the fear of men's cruelty had hovered over her. The desert was no more merciless than the cruelty she had witnessed back home. But she wondered if she was strong enough to face it. Downstairs, Wyatt dozed in a dusty cot, hat over his eyes, gun belt laid carefully at his side. Before she turned from the window, Mary quietly prayed. Her lips formed the words, "Don't let me fail." She had no illusions that the desert would be gentle. But somewhere on the other side of that emptiness was a future. Rooster cries were replaced by the braying of a lone mule tied behind the lodging house. By the faint light of early dawn, Wyatt saddled 2 horses, both rented from the settlement stable. They were lean, with skittish eyes. Far from ideal, but they would have to do. Mary adjusted the strap on her carpetbag. It felt heavier than it had yesterday, though she carried no more than a single change of clothes, a canteen, a pocket Bible, and a pressed flower from her late mother. Silence hung between them as they rode out. A few townsfolk watched, some with pity, some with mild interest, but offered no farewell. Everyone else had their own troubles. The wind whipped up dust devils at the edge of town, swirling across the road. In that pale morning light, the frontier seemed to hold its breath. They traveled north, following the rough directions scrawled in Mary's letter and Wyatt's own recollections. Their first day was uneventful: endless plains and rocky outcroppings, an occasional stand of cacti. They reached a small spring by nightfall, water shimmering like a precious jewel in the dying sun. They pitched a modest camp. Mary tried to keep busy, gathering dry brush for a fire while Wyatt checked the horses. Over a meal of jerky and biscuits, they spoke quietly. Mary revealed that she had a letter from Painted Vistas, though it was short on details. Why have chores aplenty? Food is little but enough for those who work. Come if you can. Signed by an Alois Sampson, a woman Mary's mother had once known. Wyatt, for his part, said that Painted Vistas was rumored to have silver deposits in the hills behind it. He guessed maybe that's how they kept the ranch afloat. But no one quite knew. By the flicker of firelight, Mary studied Wyatt's face. She felt a pang of empathy. He wore loneliness like a heavy coat. It clung to him, shaping his every movement. She realized they might not be so different after all, both searching for something, both scarred by life's cruelty. She offered a timid smile before turning in for the night. Wyatt returned the smile, a glimmer of gentleness behind his gruff demeanor. The morning broke with a blood-orange sunrise. The desert was wide awake, radiant with heat. The land began to slope upward, rocky ridges forming the skeleton of the territory. They rode in relative silence, saving energy and water. By midday the sun was punishing, waves of heat shimmered in the distance. Mary could feel her lips cracking and Wyatt's face dripped sweat. Still they pressed on, navigating by a solitary landmark, a massive red rock shaped like a whale's back. It was nearing late afternoon when they heard the hoofbeats. Wyatt reined in his horse, listening. An uneasy prickle marched along Mary's spine. That was more than one horse, maybe 3 or 4. She spied dust swirling off to the west, closing fast. Her breath caught. Could be travelers, could be bandits, or something worse. Wyatt motioned for Mary to ride up behind a rocky outcrop, trying to shield themselves from the open desert. But they were too late. 4 riders, faces half covered with bandanas, galloped into view. Guns glinted in the sunlight. "Morning, folks?" one called out. The stench of whiskey and gunpowder seemed to roll off them. Got anything to share?" Wyatt kept one hand near his revolver. "We're just passing through, not looking for trouble." The lead rider, his bandana stained, and a scar visible across one cheek, laughed. "I ain't looking for trouble neither. But I see 2 horses, supplies, maybe a bit of silver on that belt buckle o' yours." Mary's hand trembled against the reins. She remembered her father's threats, the look in his eyes when he used to raise a fist. She willed herself to stay calm. Wyatt gave her a quick side glance. An unspoken message: be ready. The bandit sneered. "Let's have your guns first off. Then your valuables. Might let you keep the horses, if you ask real nice." Wyatt answered by drawing his revolver in a blur. The shot roared. The bandit's horse bucked, the bullet missing its target but startling the animal. Mary's heart jumped into her throat. Then chaos erupted, gunfire, shouting, hooves kicking up clouds of dust. Instinct surged in Mary, some mixture of fear and fierce determination. She spurred her horse away from the main brunt of the fray, circling wide. The bandits were out for blood now. One took aim at Wyatt. A second shot cracked, and Wyatt's hat flew off. Mary gasped, sure he'd been killed, but he crouched low, returning fire. A third bandit wheeled around Mary, trying to grab her reins. She remembered the small pistol hidden in her skirt pocket, the one her aunt had insisted she carry. With shaking hands she wrestled it free. She fired blindly, a deafening shot. The man cursed, pulling away with a streak of blood on his shoulder. Mary's ears rang with the echoes. Wyatt's next bullet found a mark. A bandit tumbled from his saddle, dust exploding as he hit the ground. The others, disoriented, regrouped. Scarred Cheek, the leader, glared murder at Wyatt and Mary, but he seemed to weigh the cost of continuing against the risk of more injuries. With a curse, he signaled the retreat. The bandits thundered away, leaving one of their own behind, dead or dying. Heart-pounding, Mary slid off her horse, kneeling in the dust. Her entire body trembled. She'd fired a gun at a man for the first time in her life. Wyatt approached, breathing hard, hat in hand, a crease from the bullet still visible. "You all right?" he asked, voice taut with concern. She nodded, tears threatening to burn her eyes. They stared at the fallen bandit. The man lay motionless, dust settling around him. Wyatt crouched, checking for a pulse. The bandit's eyes stared blankly toward the sky. Wyatt removed the man's bandana and, with a sigh, closed his eyes. "He's gone." A wave of nausea swept over Mary. She hadn't wanted this, violence or death, but the desert demanded harsh choices. Their supplies and horses intact, they moved away from the scene with haste. As they rode on in silence, Mary's thoughts swirled. She had acted to save her life, and Wyatt's. But the knowledge that she was part of death on this desert floor weighed heavily on her soul. Even Wyatt seemed shaken. He had killed before, but each time left a scar on his conscience. They camped that night with guarded hearts, an unspoken sense that life could be snatched away at any moment. For Mary, that afternoon was the first taste of what frontier life truly demanded. A hush fell with the darkness. Wyatt sat staring into the fire, turning a small silver locket over in his hands. Mary guessed it might have belonged to someone he lost. She couldn't help but ask, quietly, who was she? Wyatt seemed startled. "My wife. Her name was Hazel." He rubbed a thumb across the locket's surface. "Bandits held up a stagecoach we were on back in Kansas. I was left for dead. She wasn't so lucky." His voice cracked slightly. Mary reached across the flickering firelight, resting a hand on his. "I'm so sorry." He inhaled a shaky breath. "I ain't told that to anyone in years, but after what happened today, it all came rushing back." Tears welled in Mary's eyes. "I know something of losing what you love, even if in a different way." She paused. "I lost my mother to sickness last year, and my father, he's still alive, but I had to leave. He was no father to me by the end." Wyatt nodded, eyes somber. "We'll carry our ghosts, don't we?" They lingered in silence. The fire crackled. Above them, countless stars spread across the sky. In that moment they shared a fragile bond. Two lost souls with regrets in their wake, forging ahead into the unknown. They awoke stiff and sore from the previous day's encounter. The desert was merciless, offering no solace. Mary's canteen sloshed with the last of their water. They'd counted on a watering hole further along this route, but doubt now gnawed at them. What if it had gone dry? By midday, thirst gnawed at Mary's throat. The horses flagged, heads drooping. Wyatt insisted they press on, sure that Painted Vistas couldn't be more than a day's ride away now. "We can't turn back," he said, voice terse. "It's got to be this way." Mary squinted at the horizon, seeing only rippling heat and jagged peaks. "One need water," she said, her voice raspy. She remembered her father's dire warnings about dehydration, how it crippled the mind, made a person delirious. She had to stay strong. Letting fear take over would spell doom. Late in the afternoon, they spotted a cluster of mesquite trees. Where there are trees, there might be a spring or at least damp soil. They veered off course, hearts pounding with a mix of hope and desperation. Fortune smiled. Among the roots of the largest mesquite, muddy water pooled. Not fresh or abundant, but enough to keep them alive. Mary almost collapsed in relief. Wyatt knelt and filled their canteens, carefully filtering as best he could through a cloth. The water tasted foul, but it was life. They lingered just long enough to feed the horses, then hurried away, mindful that predators, coyotes or even men, could be close by. Dusk began to cast purple shadows across the land. According to Mary's letter, Painted Vistas lay near a rocky pass just beyond the next ridge. As they prepared to scale that ridge, they heard a sharp cry echo across the desert, something between a scream and a curse. Wyatt stiffened. Mary felt her blood turn to ice. Carefully, they navigated toward the source of the noise, worried it might be an ambush. What they found was a wounded traveler slumped against a boulder, a horse lying dead nearby. The man's leg was twisted beneath him, pinned by a fallen chunk of rock. His face was caked in dust and blood. Mary swallowed the rising bile in her throat. Wyatt approached slowly, revolver drawn. "Friend, you hurt bad." The man's eyes snapped open. Fear flitted across his features before he winced. "My horse spooked, kicked me. Rock pinned me. Been here since morning." His breath was shallow. Mary knelt beside him. "We have some water. Let's see if we can free you." Between the two of them, they heaved the rock off the man's leg. He howled in agony as the pressure lifted. The leg was severely broken. Mary feared he might lose it if infection set in. His name was Hank Sullivan, he managed to say, heading to Painted Vistas to look for ranch work. "Didn't think I'd make it," he rasped. Mary and Wyatt exchanged uneasy glances. They had so little water, so few supplies, yet leaving him here would be a death sentence. This was the second major turning point on their journey: risk their own survival to help a stranger, or press on and save themselves. Mary's voice trembled but was resolute. "We can't just leave him." Wyatt ran a hand over his jaw. "This desert's no place for mercy." "But—" he trailed off, caught between old bitterness and a flicker of conscience. Mary's gaze carried a quiet plea. She remembered what it was like to feel abandoned. "Let's at least try," she said. "He's come so far." Exhaling, Wyatt nodded. They fashioned a rough splint for Hank's leg out of a spare piece of wood and strips of cloth from Mary's petticoat. Then they settled him carefully onto Wyatt's horse, where he slumped forward, half conscious. Wyatt walked alongside, leading the horse. Mary followed on her own mount. Their progress slowed to a crawl. The hours dragged under the darkening sky. Was Painted Vistas even in reach? Tension and thirst mounted again. Hank's moans of pain tore at Mary's heart. When the moon rose, they found a narrow, stony path leading deeper into the hills. Mary recalled the letter's instructions. When the ridge breaks, look for the lone cottonwood by a shallow creek. There you'll see Painted Vistas. But in the silver gloom, the path seemed endless. Each step threatened to twist an ankle or cause another accident. Hank drifted in and out of consciousness, muttering deliriously. Finally, near midnight, they crested a rise and saw a faint glow below, a couple of lanterns burning by a large barn. Relief washed through Mary, so powerful she almost wept. They had reached Painted Vistas. A pair of ranch hands rushed out when Mary and Wyatt called for help. One was a stocky woman in a wide-brimmed hat, the other a tall man with a graying beard. They supported Hank into the barn, where they had a makeshift bunkhouse. Mary dismounted shakily, feeling every muscle protest. Her face and arms were sunburned, her lips parched. Wyatt, though exhausted, managed to speak. "Got a man with a busted leg. We did what we could." The stocky woman introduced herself as Eloise Sampson, the one who had written Mary that letter. Her weathered face softened when Mary gave her name. "You're Catherine Quinn's girl," Eloise murmured, voice laden with memory. "You're a brave one. Coming here alone?" Mary's eyes glistened with relief. "I didn't come alone," she said, glancing at Wyatt. Eloise nodded. She gave Wyatt a measuring look. "A friend, I see." He said nothing, only dipped his head politely. They hustled Hank into a bed of straw, fetching hot water and bandages. Eloise set to work with practiced efficiency. Mary and Wyatt slumped by the barn door, letting exhaustion wash over them. Suddenly, a tall, broad-shouldered man with intense eyes strode in, spurs clinking. His name was Ambrose Carter, Painted Vista's foreman and Eloise's longtime business partner. He looked at Mary and Wyatt with suspicion. "We got room for honest workers, but not for trouble," he said bluntly. "I heard shots a ways back earlier in the day. That you?" Wyatt's hand twitched near his revolver. Mary forced a calm tone. "We were ambushed by bandits. We defended ourselves." Ambrose eyed them. "Long as you didn't drag them here. We don't need that kind of problem." Eloise placed a firm hand on Ambrose's shoulder, quieting him. "They saved this man's life and came all this way. We owe them water, a meal, and a bed at least." She guided Mary outside to see the ranch's small paddock, a weather-beaten bunkhouse, and a main lodge. Moonlight revealed painted vistas in shadowy outline, simple yet sturdy structures hugging the foot of a rocky hill. By day, Mary imagined the land might glow with the colors that gave the ranch its name. Eloise offered Mary a battered tin cup of water. "Drink. Then rest. We'll sort out everything else come morning." Mary managed a grateful nod. She drank, the water tasting sweeter than anything she'd known. Her heart swelled with gratitude. That night, Mary collapsed into a cot in a corner of the lodge. She was safe at last, or so she hoped. Wyatt bunked in the barn, near Hank. The day's trials weighed heavily on them both, and yet a new question arose. Painted Vistas might be a sanctuary, but every sanctuary had its own secrets and conflicts. When dawn crept in, Painted Vistas revealed itself in warm hues. Ridges of layered rock stood to the west, their bands of red and orange shining in the early sunlight. Hens clucked in a small coop, a wiry stable boy tossed feed to the horses, and a pair of ranch hands worked at repairing a fence. A calm, industrious air filled the morning. Mary emerged from the lodge to find Eloise already at work, kneading dough for breakfast biscuits. The older woman beckoned her over. "You can help me in the kitchen for starters. If you're staying, we'll teach you ranch chores soon enough." Relief flooded Mary. She was already more than willing to work for her keep. She yearned to prove herself. "Yes, ma'am," she said, rolling up her sleeves. Wyatt joined them at the outdoor table, politely tipping his hat. His expression was guarded. Ambrose hovered near the fence line, eyes flicking toward Wyatt from time to time. It was clear he distrusted strangers with guns. An hour later, they were all crowded into the lodge's main room, breaking bread. Hank lay propped up on a makeshift cot in the corner, a rag on his forehead. He mumbled a thank you to Mary and Wyatt as they helped feed him. After the meal, Ambrose confronted Wyatt. "What brings you here exactly?" Wyatt met his gaze. "Heard there might be silver in these hills." He didn't hide his ambition. "I was hoping to negotiate an arrangement. Maybe do some prospecting on the land." Ambrose's voice hardened. "We're raising cattle here, not outlaws. The last thing we need is prospectors tromping all over, stirring up trouble with the local tribes or other bandits." Eloise cut in, her voice calm but firm. "We've got enough land that if Wyatt wants to survey a corner of it, we can discuss that. We do, in fact, suspect some ore deposits. It could help the ranch if managed right." Ambrose's jaw twitched. or ruin us if word gets out and we get overrun. We have something good here, Aloys. Don't forget what greed can do." Wyatt bristled, but said nothing. Mary could sense tension building. Painted Vistas was a fragile haven. These people had carved out a piece of survival in a punishing land, and they were protective of it. Still, Aloys turned to Mary with warmth. "Your mother was a dear friend. I promised I'd help you if ever you came. We need hands around here if you're willing." Mary felt a wellspring of gratitude. "I am?" she whispered, voice thick with emotion. Aloys's eyes flicked to Wyatt. "You're welcome to stay and help for a time. Earn your keep, then we can talk about any prospecting. But mark my words, this ranch is built on trust. Cross us, and you'll have the entire ranch against you." Wyatt nodded solemnly. "Fair enough." Thus a tentative peace was established. Over the following days, Mary threw herself into ranch work. She learned to milk goats, mend fences, and find hidden pockets of water around the property. Under Aloys's guidance, she discovered a sense of purpose she'd never known. The older ranch hands offered teasing encouragement. They seemed to respect Mary's willingness to learn. Wyatt toiled as well, assisting with heavier chores, surveying the nearby rock faces for signs of precious ore in his spare time. He kept the locket close, a reminder of past losses but also of the future he wanted to build. Mary watched him wrestle with moral uncertainty. Did chasing silver align with the man he wanted to become, or would it bury him under old regrets? Ambrose, still wary, observed Wyatt's every move. Yet a certain grudging respect formed. Wyatt didn't shirk hard labor, and he never threatened the ranch's security. Even so, tension crackled under the surface. The ranch's biggest challenge came one scorching afternoon. Cattle refused to graze in the heat, and the water troughs ran low. Mary volunteered to ride out with Wyatt to a nearby canyon creek. They'd fill barrels and haul them back on a mule-drawn cart. Aloys approved, trusting Mary's willingness and Wyatt's skill with a gun. Mary and Wyatt set out, sweat already beading on their brows. The desert shimmered. An hour's ride brought them to the canyon's edge, where a thin stream trickled past tall red rocks. They began filling the barrels, grateful for the water. The canyon was eerily silent, save for the trickle of water and occasional buzz of insects. Then a voice barked, "Hold it right there!" They froze. Emerging from behind a boulder was Scar Cheek, the bandit leader they had clashed with days before. Now he had two men at his side, guns drawn. Mary's heart lurched. She recognized the hatred in Scar Cheek's eyes. "Well, well," Scar Cheek sneered. "I knew I'd run into you again, cowboy. And you too, little lady. We've got a score to settle." Mary's thoughts whirled. She reached for her small pistol, but Scar Cheek aimed a rifle at her. "Ooh-ah," he hissed. "My friend died in that dust because of you. I think it's time we even the scales." Wyatt's revolver was holstered at his hip, but he couldn't outdraw 3 guns. Fear and adrenaline coursed through Mary. Would they be killed right here out of revenge? Scar Cheek's lips curled in a cruel smile. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to give us that horse and cart, and all the water. Then you'll hand over your weapons. Maybe I'll let you crawl back to your precious ranch." Mary's mind raced. Painted Vistas depended on that water. Without it, the cattle would suffer, possibly die. The ranch might wither. She and Wyatt couldn't just yield, yet to fight meant risking their lives. She looked to Wyatt, who met her gaze. She saw in his eyes an apology and a fierce resolve. Slowly, Wyatt raised his hands, stepping forward. "Take my gun," he said, unbuckling his belt. "Let her go. She's no threat." He let the belt drop to the ground. "But I ask you, please don't do this. There's no need for more killing." Scar Cheek spat. "You took one of ours. Fair is fair?" Time stretched. Mary realized something. Wyatt was deliberately moving away from her, drawing their attention to him. Was he sacrificing himself so she might get a chance to act? She felt tears burn her eyes. She'd come so far, found a place where she belonged, and now she was about to lose the man who'd saved her life more than once. She clasped her small pistol hidden at the back of her belt. If she made a move, they'd cut them both down. But if she did nothing, the bandits would leave Painted Vistas to starve for water, and possibly kill them anyway. Mary's pulse thundered in her ears. Fear and courage warred within her. Wyatt took a step closer to the bandits. "Let her be," he repeated softly. Scar cheek growled. His companions fingered the triggers of their rifles. In that split second, Mary remembered the vow she made to herself never again to be powerless in the face of cruelty. She steeled herself. She acted. With trembling speed, she whipped out her small pistol and fired at the nearest bandit. The shot rang out, echoing off canyon walls. She missed the man's heart but clipped his arm. He cried out, dropping his rifle. Scar cheek roared, swinging his own gun toward Mary. Wyatt lunged, tackling him before he could fire. The rifles discharged, bullets ricocheting off rock. Dirt and rock chips flew everywhere. Mary's ears rang as she ducked behind a boulder, reloading with shaking hands. One bandit was wounded, cursing. Scar cheek rolled with Wyatt, fists flying. A vicious struggle. The third bandit found his rifle and aimed at Wyatt's back. In that moment, Mary's vision sharpened. She raised her pistol again, shot ripping through the hot air. The third bandit jerked and fell. She felt both horror and grim determination flood her. She had no time to reflect. Wyatt was pinned under Scar cheek, who pressed a knife to Wyatt's throat. She sprang up, aiming her pistol at Scar cheek's head. "Drop it," she shouted, voice cracking. For an excruciating second, Scar cheek glanced from Wyatt's terrified eyes to Mary's unwavering aim. He saw the resolve in her trembling posture. Slowly, he let the knife fall. Wyatt scrambled free. The wounded bandit groaned, pressing a bloody cloth to his arm. Scar cheek glared at Mary, hatred radiating from his eyes. "Go on, kill me then. We'll see if you got the stomach for it." Mary's breath came in ragged bursts. She looked at Wyatt, who watched her with a mix of caution and sorrow. Killing Scar cheek now would end the threat for good. But the weight of another man's blood on her hands. The desert demanded harsh choices, but was she willing to cross that final line? She took a shaky breath. "I won't murder you in cold blood, but you ever come near Painted Vistas again, I will defend my home." Scar cheek spat in the dust, fury twisting his features. Wyatt collected his revolver and kept it trained on the bandits. Mary's hand shook so badly that she had to lower her pistol. The moral conflict roiled within. She craved justice for the violence they'd suffered, but not at the cost of her own humanity. Wyatt motioned with his gun. "Take your wounded friend and get out of here." Scar cheek glowered but relented. Grabbing the injured man, he pulled him to his feet. They stumbled away, leaving their rifles behind. Mary and Wyatt listened to their footsteps fade into the canyon's depths. Only then did Mary sag against a boulder, tears mingling with sweat. Wyatt approached, gently taking the pistol from her trembling hand. "You did right," he said softly. "Sometimes in this land, letting a man walk away is the boldest thing you can do." Her stomach churned. "I'm not sure if I made a mistake." He could come back. Wyatt put a hand on her shoulder. "Then we'll be ready. But you saved my life today. You saved Painted Vistas. Don't doubt your heart." Those words, coming from a man whose life was scarred by violence, carried weight. Mary closed her eyes, letting the tears slip free. Fear, relief, and a hint of pride all churned together. She had faced the desert's cruelty and found the strength to choose mercy. They loaded the barrels of water and rode back to the ranch, battered but alive. Ambrose and Eloise rushed out to meet them, panic on their faces. After hearing the story, Ambrose's expression darkened. "Those bandits could strike at the ranch," he warned. Eloise set a hand on his arm. "We'll set watches, stay vigilant. But for now we have water and Mary and Wyatt are safe. That's what matters." Mary dismounted, wobbly with exhaustion. Eloise hugged her close, voice trembling with relief. Wyatt stood by, hat in hand, looking oddly vulnerable. Painted Vistas people quickly moved to protect the ranch, but also to honor Mary's bravery. Over the next few days, Painted Vistas braced for retaliation from Scar Cheek's gang, but none came. Perhaps the bandits realized the ranch would be too well defended, Or perhaps they recognized a new fierceness in Mary's eyes. In the aftermath, Alois formally offered Mary a place at the ranch. "I think you've more than earned your keep," she said, eyes shining with pride. "Stay, and you'll always have a home." Mary accepted with quiet gratitude. She felt a sense of belonging she had never known. Painted Vistas was not just a stop on her journey. It was her refuge and hopefully her future. Wyatt, for his part, approached Ambrose and Eloise. He explained that if there was indeed silver in the hills, mining it might strengthen the ranch's finances. Ambrose grudgingly agreed to let Wyatt prospect, on the condition that any discovery be used ethically. No brining in hordes of outsiders, no deals with shady financiers. Would do it all above board, Ambrose insisted. Wyatt, humbled by recent events and by Mary's courage, gave his word. And so they began a precarious partnership. Wyatt staked a small claim under Painted Vistas' banner, with the aim of helping the ranch prosper. He found not a motherlode, but enough ore to justify a future venture. For the first time he felt his life had direction, rooted in community rather than lonely wandering. Days turned to weeks. Hank's leg healed slowly, with Mary and Wyatt often bringing him meals and reading aloud from Mary's pocket Bible. The ranch endured the desert's hardships, forging onward. Mary's restless nightmares of ambush and gunfire gradually eased, replaced by the daily demands of ranch life. Though she would always remember that fateful confrontation, she carried herself with quiet confidence. She had survived and chosen mercy. She had discovered the power of courage and compassion in the Wild West's unforgiving embrace. We cannot choose the land we are born into, nor the hardships that shape us, but we can choose how we face them and what lines we will or will not cross in our pursuit of survival. Out in the desert, Mary learned that mercy can be a mightier weapon than a gun, and that loyalty can forge a new home out of dust and desperation. In the end, it was not the harsh sun or the biting wind that defined her fate. It was her resolve to do what was right, no matter how difficult, no matter the risks. That willingness to protect life without losing her own soul became her true victory in the Wild West. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the harsh Wyoming desert and into the heart of Painted Vistas. If Mary's courage and Wyatt's redemption moved you, please like this story, subscribe for more narrations, and share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear what struck you most about their struggle, and how you think you'd handle life's toughest choices out on the frontier.